Hello and welcome to a very, very, very special episode of Dear Rach and Soph. I've got the glitzy feel-good fiction um, necklace on because we are talking about your book today, which is definitely feel-good fiction. So today, oh, by the way, hello, I'm Rachael Johns and I'm here with the fabulous Sophie Green, who was wearing a necklace. So for those of you who are only listening, I'm really sorry, but I'm just have to have a fangirl moment over her fabulous pink chunky chain necklace. Where'd you get that? I need it.
I got it from Husk, actually, one of the Husk stores in Sydney.
Oh, it's
A while
beautiful.
ago, though. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I'll just steal it, Nick. I'll
And
steal
hello to the listeners
it.
slash viewers or the viewers.
Hello to everyone. Thank you for being here today. We, since we started this podcast a couple of years ago now, each time one of us has had a book out, we've done a bonus episode where we interview each other about the book, the writing process, and whatever else comes up along the way. So today I'm going to pick Sophie's brain about her new book, Lessons in Love at the Seaside Salon. So Sophie, I'm going to pretend that, I'm going to read your bio to start with, just in case anyone's just stumbled across us. And I'm wondering
Yeah.
who on earth Sophie Green is. Sophie Green is an author and publisher who lives in Sydney. In her spare time, she writes about country music on her website, Sunburnt Country Music. Sophie's debut novel, The Inaugural Meeting of the Fairvale Ladies Book Club, which is a tongue twister and I always scared I'm going to get it wrong, was a top 10 bestseller and was shortlisted for the Australian Book Industry Awards for General Fiction Book of the Year 2018 and longlisted for both the Matt Richel Award for New Writer of the Year 2018 and the Indie Book Award for Debut Fiction 2018. Sophie Green is internationally published and the Shelley Bay Ladies Swimming Circle, Thursdays at the Orange Blossom House, the Bellbird River Choir, weekends with the Sunshine Gardening Society, and Art Out at the Duchess Hotel were also top 10 bestsellers. Now, before we dive in to what this latest Sophie Green book is about and how it came about, I just want to give a quick note to our listeners slash viewers that we have already recorded a very long podcast today. So if we're sounding a little frazzled, that's why. It's
Yeah.
not the fact that I've just poured a glass of wine to celebrate Sophie's new book.
Yes, it was an hour and a half long podcast. So this is our commitment to the podcasting life. Hashtag
Yes.
podcast life, Rach.
Yes. So this is the latest book, Lessons in Love at the Seaside Salon. I keep wanting to say Seaside Hotel. Maybe I need a holiday and I'm dreaming of going to a seaside hotel. I also probably need a haircut, so maybe I need to go to the Seaside Salon too. But I'm just going to quickly read read the blurb, and then we're going to dive into a few. I'm going to ask you some questions about why the book came about. Oh, you'll find out. Okay, so Lost Love. Trudy, 57, owns Summertime Salon in the sun-soaked Central Coast. I feel like
I should say it says Summertime Salon because I actually didn't see that was the original
Oh,
title.
true. Seaside Salon. So
Monday
yes,
mornings at the Summertime
I
Salon,
will
and
fix that
they didn't actually show me the blurb
because
of the proof before I
yes, I'm reading from the advanced reading copy, folks. So it's not completely final. So Lost Love Trudy, 57, owns the Seaside Salon in the sun-soaked Central Coast town of Terrigal. She loves her job and her clients, but since Laurie died, life hasn't been the same. Love on the rocks. Anna, 42, never gets her hair done. Sounds like me. No, I do really. With two children and an absent husband, she doesn't have time for vanity. When Anna kicks Gary out, will she also discover the joys of caring for herself, starting with highlights? Then we have unrequited love. Hairdresser Evie, 33, has never had much luck with men. As a single mother, love is the last thing on her mind. Then new hire Sam joins the salon, but is their relationship all that it seems? And then we have first love. Everyone loves a first love. Apprentice Josie, 19, is seeking independence. She's determined to make her own way in the world, especially when she meets Brett. How long can she keep him a secret from her overprotective parents? At a little salon by the sea, four different women with intertwined lives will find themselves through love, heartbreak, and learning to love again. Sure, I should have said find themselves. I'm just going to lower my desk here again. I have an up-down desk. So Sophie, I'm just trying to think that when we first started doing this podcast, I think you were at the stage where you were thinking of having a year off writing and well, I don't know necessarily a year off writing, but a year off that book a year publication schedule that you have been on since your first book came out. Is that right?
No, there were 2 years between Fairvale and Shelley Bay, and another two
Okay.
between Shelley Bay and Orange
I
Blossom
can't
House.
do the maths, you see.
Then I was on book a year from that.
And so why were you thinking of having a year off?
I just thought, well, as you know, because you
You're
write
pretty
more than
busy.
yeah. I have a full-time job and I have other things in my life, and I just thought maybe I should take a year off. And I'll be really frank, this is the publishing behind the scenes of it all, because you're holding a proof copy. Proof copies take 2 to 3 months off the schedule, as
Mm.
in the author loses 2 to 3 months. And when you're on a book a year schedule, 2 to 3 months is a lot to lose. And I
Yeah.
actually just thought I
So
don't.
so you mean like the advanced reading comes out 2 or 3 months before the book
Yeah,
does,
so you lose, so you
and you
have to
have
get
to have
through all.
it ready
Yeah,
basically by then.
that's right. And then you have to, and then it's basically you're waiting because you've essentially got the book almost ready to go to the printer, but it's not going to the printer for another 2 to 3 months.
I'm in that
So,
waiting stage at the moment.
yeah, and so that 2 to 3 months I always felt could be better used. And so I'm not. I know people love the advanced reading copies, but I'm not convinced of the value of them when it comes at a cost of writing time
Yeah,
for
I
the
kind of
author.
agree with you.
Yeah,
You know,
so
yeah.
that's so I just kind of thought I need some time away from that schedule. If I didn't have the proof copies, then I would have
No,
been happily
not.
going through a book a year. Yeah.
I was gonna say not all authors do. Like not all publishers print every book
No,
in
they don't. And
reading
so
copy. So
again,
could you have just said, could we not do
I
a
tried that.
reading copy? You tried. Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Anyway,
So so
so you
anyway, I just
decided on a year
yeah,
pause.
I felt I will
What?
have not a year off writing, as you said, but a year just where I wasn't publishing something because I just felt that grind of it. But
Right.
then I got an idea for a new
Yep.
book. So
And so, how did that come about?
I was sitting in a meeting actually, and it was going to be a long meeting, and my part of it was right at the start, and then I didn't have anything more to do. So I
Your
am
mind started drifting.
mind started drifting, and I think boredom is a great generator of inspiration.
Mm.
So my mind started drifting, and then I had a notebook with me, and I got this idea that popped into my head because I had been watching a lot of character comedy by an American comedian called Casey Dressler, who has a mini series called Hot Look Salon, and there's a character called Donna at Hot Look Salon, and it's set in the 1980s. So I've been watching this hairdressing comedy set in the 80s with the 80s music, and then I was listening to an album called Girlhood by a Brisbane artist called Hayley Marston, which was influenced by 80s music. I know Hayley from country music side of things. I interviewed her about Girlhood when it came out last year. And so I was listening to Girlhood, and there was a lot in there about the lives of girls and women, really. And that's what I write about. So these things were swirling around. And I think that in the nature of creative practice, who knows where things really crystallize. But suddenly I had this idea of a seaside salon. It was called the Summertime Salon at that point, and I knew I wanted it to be on the central coast of New South Wales because I know that area really well.
Yep.
And so it has a lot of emotional resonance for me because my grandparents lived there. But I also just thought, I don't know any books that are set there. And I really think a novel should be set on the central coast because a lot of people live there, for one thing.
Yeah,
And they
yeah,
have to
yeah.
be interested in stories that are about where they live. So this all popped into my head, and I had Trudy, the first character we meet, pretty much straight away. And I knew she was a chain
So
smoker.
the hair salon came first, then the location, and then the character.
I think the salon idea, because I was looking at these videos by Casey Dressler, so I was like, oh, hairdressing salon. And I thought 1980s.
It's kind of weird there's not more hairdressing books because every time I used to go to the hairdressers, and I say used to because it was old, I've changed hairdressers, they knew that I was a writer. They're like, oh my gosh, you should write a book about a hairdressing salon. We have so many stories. And it's true, it's a bit like a pub or a hotel, right? Or a restaurant. There's so many stories happen there. And we've got lots of books about um pubs, hotels, that kind of stuff. I don't know if I've ever read another book set in a hairdressing salon.
You probably haven't, because I couldn't think of one,
Hmm.
and I do often think about setting stories where none have been set before. So Central
Yeah.
Coast, hairdressing salon, and it's partly just to make sure that a range of experiences are covered in the stories.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so yeah, if it hasn't been done before, then obviously it's interesting to do, I think.
Yeah.
So all of that, and I do spend a bit of time in salons, have done since I was a kid. My mother used to take me and my brother to the salon with her because she would have streaks put in, so that would be quite a long time. So we would sit there and I would observe. So that went on
What
for
did your brother do?
uh, poor Nick. He was definitely bored a lot of the time, but we would sometimes go to the park.
Yeah, yeah.
But we were in the salon, and I do think that was in my subconscious that I'd spent a lot of
Mm.
my childhood, not a lot of my, but you know what I mean. And for a kid, it always seems like a
No,
long.
your childhood in the salon would have been in the 80s, would it?
Yeah, so yes, it would have been. And so I was sitting there listening to the music and watching everything that was going on as a kid. And I think that that's just popped out at a certain point. And I have had the question, and I don't know if you've had this question when you were writing the other Bridget, for example, about whether you'd ever worked in a library, but I am regularly asked
Yeah. Yep.
whether I've done it. And I have made the point before that this is, I think, only asked of female writers, whether, to
Yes,
establish whether we have the bona fides to write about what we're writing about because we
so
don't
true.
inherently have it, according to a lot of people. And
What men can imagine things that we can't.
yeah, so I have been asked, did you work in a hairdressing salon? No, but I've been a client in a hairdressing salon.
Also, when you think about the amount of books we've both written, read, like I could not have done all the jobs in my
No.
book. And if I had done all the jobs, it would be very boring because literally I've been a teacher for about 6 months. I worked in a library, I've worked in a supermarket. That's basically the extent of my working life. So if it was just about me, it would be very, very boring. That's why we do research. And also, as you said, like we observe the world. You were observing the world of hairdressing since a young child.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a curly haired person, I can tell you hair is quite a subject because curly haired
Mm,
people, we don't get to style our hair the way a lot of people do unless we want to torture it because often if you're using heat on it, it's going to fry it. And quite a while ago, hair is an emotional subject. We know that because when people lose their hair due to chemotherapy, it's really upsetting.
yes.
And I might have mentioned this in a previous episode, but when I was really sick in 2011, because I had been in an induced coma and because I'd been incredibly ill and there was a massive shock to my system, my hair started falling out. And I
Yeah.
had been one of those people who hadn't quite understood why anyone might be so upset about hair falling out
And then you did
until
it.
it started happening to me. And my hairdresser, I didn't tell her it was falling out. So because it took me a while to recover, I didn't
You
get
kind of
back
noticed.
to her for a
Mm.
while. And so I think it might have been 6 weeks was when I was physically capable of going to see her.
Mhm.
And I wanted to have a trim and those sorts of things. And I just told her what had happened. And I didn't tell her that I'd been losing my hair. But after telling her what had happened, she just looked at me and said, "Have you been losing your hair?" And I said, "Yes. How did you know that?" And she said, you've been really sick.
Yeah,
And that
yeah.
happens. And I remember again, I had not been interested, not paid much mind to hair fall or anything like that before this happened. And then the emotional consequence of losing hair when the rest of my dignity appeared to have gone.
Gone as well. Yeah,
It was like,
yeah.
oh, now my hair's falling out. And
That's
so
the final straw kind of thing.
yeah, so I really appreciated what that meant to me. But also, as I said, as a curly haired person, I'd made a decision after years of going through school and having to have it brushed and things because curly hair wasn't acceptable in its natural state. I'd made a decision to wear my hair as African Americans would call it, natural hair.
Yep.
And a lot of what I know about curly hair has come from reading things about African Americans and how they work with their hair because
Yeah.
there's just not a lot around about curly hair. So hair is definitely important to most of us, I think, and I think that's a good thing because we all have different sorts of hair. We want to do
Yeah.
sorts of things with it, but I do think, therefore, a salon is a place that holds a lot of emotion and
Mm,
what can
100%.
do. Sometimes you're just going in for a trim, and barbershops are probably different because blokes are just going in for a number one, two, or
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That
but
could be next novel. The
sorry,
barbershop, the barbershop is
barbershop.
terrible.
So I think salons can be the site of a lot of emotion, particularly if you have long-term clients who are aging, who are going through illness, hair loss.
Yeah.
You would have someone perhaps who in her youth wanted really long hair and then she cuts her hair off and those sorts of things. And I remember reading years and years ago that women will often cut off all their hair when they've had a huge
Break up
loss.
or
So
something.
a
Yeah.
breakup or a death or things like that, they'll just cut all their hair off, and so that also ties into the emotional nature of hair, I think. So yeah, so salons therefore are
It's
dealing
interesting you didn't put any of those things in the book.
about hair being
Like, yeah, yeah.
well because
Well, I suppose he did in a way because we have Anna
yeah,
who's going
we
through
wanted to
a
change, yeah,
breakup, right? She's leaves her husband, or she tells her husband to get out. And I find her quite relatable as a character. I think like all of them are very relatable, and I'll talk about how you go about character in a minute. But you know, it's very easy in a relationship to like sort of forget about the other, or not put time and effort into keeping the relationship fresh and appreciating the other person because life is busy. Her husband is working all the time. She's looking after the kids, feeding him. She basically feels like his housekeeper, and then she tells her to go, and then she finally decides to put a little bit of effort into her own hair. So Anna's the one who takes her mum to the hairdresser every
Mm.
couple of weeks and sits there reading through the crossword, I think. Um, but yeah, so it's interesting. I guess you did have that kind of in there. I just didn't,
But
go.
I did think about it, but in order to have a storyline that showed that, it would have had to be one of the clients,
Yeah,
and I've already had Trudy grieving,
yeah.
and so
You didn't
because
want another one.
three of the four characters were hairdressers, if it would have, so Trudy was already grieving, her hair was already short, so
Yeah,
I was like, if I, in order to show something rather than telling about the hair and the grief, then it would have had to be a client, and then that would have probably required more than just a passing reference.
yes. I've got it. Interesting. I've got some questions I want to ask you, but I just something you said there made me think. So sorry, everyone, going all around in circles. But you said three of the four main characters are hairdressers,
Mhm.
right? Now that's quite a interesting thing to do because often I remember like when I've written point of view novels or I've talked like multiple point of view novels or I've talked to people about them. One of mine had three people who were all they did different jobs, but they were all mums of teenage boys, all about the same age, all female or straight. So it it can be hard to differentiate them. Now you've got three people who are all hairdressers. So I guess what I was saying, what was your pre-draft like character work and how did you go about making the hairdressers, different?
So, same character work that I always do, which is to take the 12 questions framework
Well,
from the
that's right.
American writer Francesca Leah Block and just go through. I tend to write a few paragraphs before I actually get into the 12 questions. So, I actually will sit and think about who these women are, and I will just start typing notes. And sometimes it's a whole backstory that I'm not going to use, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
just be all this detail. And then
You
then
need
I
to
will
know
go
them.
into the 12 questions and go, okay, 12 questions are going to inform what goes into the novel, but I need to know that backstory. And I may end up referring to it, who knows, but it's just getting to know the character. So I do that, and then I'll have a separate document which is major plot points, and that's where I plot the emotional arc of their story, not necessarily the fact part of their story in terms of what happens to them. And so all of that
And let's
happens.
dig a little bit deeper, the emotional arc. So you think about where they are at the beginning of the story and where you want them to be at the end. Is that what you mean by emotional arc?
Yeah, and also that can involve who else is involved, who else is in their story. So, and I have to use it in reference now to the novel I'm writing because the process for Seaside Salon's well in
So
advance.
far away?
So for the one I'm writing for next year, I have four main characters again, and then but I may make it five because in the process of doing this character work for one of the characters, she had an aunt character pop up who was not in my original
Oh,
plan.
interesting.
And I was just thinking, well, who is this?
So
Who is
hang
this
on, let me
woman?
get this thing. So you do the plan before you do the character sheets, or is it all kind of done at the same time?
Yeah, well,
You
in
said
order
you had,
to
yeah.
in order to talk to my publisher about things in enough time to have the contract sorted, basically, I don't have time to do the in-depth
The
character.
character
I
work
do
first.
some character I notes,
Yeah.
have an idea of who I want in it, so I know their names and I know their ages, but I don't do the in-depth work until I'm going to start.
Okay. And so at the in-depth work stage, someone
Popped
new
up.
came up.
Yeah, she just
Because I actually said here, so I've I was asking you about what's on the spreadsheet, and maybe we'll go back to that in a second. But I said, did anything surprise you in the writing of the Seaside Salon? And obviously in the new book, a character surprised you.
Yeah, in Seaside Salon, Anna's mother Ingrid was not part of the plan either. Now she's not a
Okay.
major character, but she pops up she popped up pretty strongly when I started writing Anna.
So did you have Anna? How was Anna getting to the hairdressers?
Well, I knew she existed, but I didn't know. I actually thought Ingrid was just going to be a mechanism to get Anna to the
Anna to
salon.
the
I didn't
hairdressers?
actually think
Okay.
that Ingrid would talk as much as she has in the story.
Don't you
So
love that though when that happens? Yeah.
that's part of the
That's
fun.
the magic. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just because and the reason why Ingrid started talking, I realized, was because I needed to know why Anna had behaved the way she had. In the first chapter,
Uh,
she kicks her husband out of the house, and I was like,
yeah.
and I
Yeah.
that's one
So
of
you
the
hadn't planned the backstory of her growing up. So spoilers, peoples. If you don't like spoilers, time to just switch off and go read the book and then come. But Anna had quite a traumatic childhood. Her father suffered quite a bad accident, and he
mm,
needed to be cared for. And because of the era you're dealing with, her brothers sort of get off scot-free. They get to continue their childhood.
yeah.
She's expected to help out. And so when did that come into it?
That came when I started, I think when I started writing the manuscript itself, and I was into Anna's second chapter, and I had a scene with her and Ingrid, and I was thinking, why is Anna feeling so strongly about her husband not being around? Like, what is
Yeah,
the
when
issue
it's kind
here?
of a quite, especially in that era, it would have been quite
Yeah.
a regular, you know,
He was working really
thing.
long hours. They were passing like ships in the night, that sort of thing. But one day she just snapped and
Yeah,
threw him out. And thinking there's got to be something behind that. And this is again part of this weird process of writing stories where we think we're making them up, but then the characters are going to tell us how it goes.
hmm,
So I just started to think, okay, why is this happening? So there was this scene where she was taking her mother Ingrid to the salon anyway. So I thought, well, I've got them in the car together. What's the conversation about? And then the backstory, which is not part of the conversation, but it's about Anna and how she grew up and what sort of sacrifices she and her mother had to make
yeah,
to look after her father, and the fact that Anna's brothers were able to live the lives they'd planned to, and Anna felt, well, she didn't get to do the things she wanted to do because she was helping her mother primarily was the main relationship, but they both had to look after her father. So that sense of, oh well, okay, she's essentially been doing this work since she was quite
no
young.
wonder she's sick of it.
She's sick of it, and also she had a father who couldn't be there. Really, he was physically there, but he couldn't help raise the kids. He
Yeah,
wasn't working, and so he was just a presence and nothing more. And and then Anna has her husband Gary, who is working to support the family, but he's not even a presence in the house. He's just not there.
yeah,
So
yeah.
why would she put up with that again?
Hmm.
And
It was very, now here's a question, it just making me laugh. I'm making myself laugh because I'm thinking about things that you just said a few moments ago, and I can't remember if it was in this conversation or the one we've just had in the podcast previously, because we've just done another one. But I remember thinking like all these characters and their backstories are really well formed. I've got a question here to ask you about backstory in a moment, but now as far as I know, you've never been married. I don't
no,
know. Maybe. Yeah, right. But you've got that. You've perfectly got how, and it's this is just, I'm like just laughing at myself asking this because it's funny because people ask me this about The Bad Bridesmaid, which was my last book, and had a woman in there who was doing, uh, uh, dating apps kind of thing, and she's in her early 20s, and I had a few journalists ask me um how did you know, like how did you make that character real or feel real, because you've been married for like 20 years and you were married before dating apps. And so I'm not going to ask you that question, how do you know that? I'm going to ask you a wider question, in how much do you think readers like, so I also have a thing here, I said how many past lives has Sophie had. I wrote that down, right? Because she's so wise and she can kind of get in the head of lots of different people. But what do you think it is about you as a person slash author who is able to really, like, you do get, have been, I'm married, I haven't lost a husband kind of thing, but I've, been around people who have. Obviously we've all probably done the young love thing at some stage, and but you really, really do feel like you understand these people. Like, do you feel that that's just part of who you are? Do you feel like you have had lots of past lives, or is there something you think that aspiring authors may be able to do to make them more empathetic and make them be able to step into the shoes of people in an experience that they haven't had?
thank you for saying that, and that's always what I hope. Because look, when I was younger, I thought I'd had a lot of past lives, but I think in this life, what
Yeah.
I've done is listen, and this also feeds into me doing a lot of interviewing. And I've said before, I consider everything I do in writing, and most of my life is an extension of being yoga, or the
Yeah.
practice of being
Yeah.
yoga. And I do think that teaching, so teaching, if you're alert, and certainly the way I was trained now, because I've been practicing for a really long time, I was not trained the way a lot of people are trained these days, which is just go off to a course and do your teacher
Learn
training.
it,
I was
yeah.
essentially blooded for several years by my original teacher. And look, I've always been interested in stories. You would have been too from a young age when you're a reader. You're obviously curious about the world. And I think this is one of the great values of reading, and that I include audiobook listening as reading. So when you're curious about the world, your antennae are up and your
Yeah,
ears and eyes
yeah.
are open. And as a teacher, you learn to, at least I have learned over the years, to read the story in the body. So
Yeah.
there's a lot that goes on in people's lives that is written all over their bodies, and they don't necessarily realize it because they're not
Mm.
aware of what's going on. But when you've been practicing yoga for a long time and teaching for a long time, you can see it. And so
Yeah.
I used to occasionally say things to people, and it would alarm them slightly. So I don't say it anymore because it's I'm not a
What do
psych.
you mean things like you could sort of psychically kind of type things where you
Well,
know
it's
what's going
not.
in?
I don't think it is that. I think it's
No, I
actually.
didn't mean that's the wrong word, but like, did you say stuff to people like you
Well, there
could
was
tell what was
someone.
going on in their life kind of thing?
Well, there was someone I met once who said his right lung had collapsed twice in his lifetime for no reason. And I'd been chatting to him for a while. It was at the Tamworth Country Music Festival. I was chatting to someone, and
Yeah.
he's like, "I just have no idea, why that happened." And I said, "How's your relationship with your father?" And he said, "We don't speak." And I said, "Yeah, that's what I figured." And it was because he right lung, so the masculine side on the body is right, feminine side is left,
Yeah.
moon side.
So if
So
he'd said his left lung, you would have asked how his relationship with his
well,
mother was.
yeah, then the lungs. So this is also in terms of the body. So the lungs are to do with grief in actually a Chinese energy system. So the lungs are to do with grief, and he said it had collapsed twice. Now I knew he didn't. We'd been conversing long enough. I knew he wasn't gay. He didn't have a brother. So it
Mhm.
had to be a male foundational person in his life for that kind of grief to happen
Ah,
twice in a row. So I just said, "How's your relationship with your father?" And it's also things like, there was a young woman I was teaching once, and she said, "Oh, I've got this pain in my neck," and this is another related to masculine side. And I said, "Oh, which side of your neck?" And she said, "Oh, the right side." And I'd been teaching her for a while, so I knew what her life circumstances were. I said, "Oh, so your boyfriend's being a pain in the neck?" And she just looked at me and said, "Yes." And because it was masculine
yeah,
side,
yeah.
and
And
she
yeah.
said, "Oh, this has just come on recently," and it was like,
Wow.
so the body, because the body is an amazing self-organizing system,
Yeah.
and it's always striving towards homeostasis. It will try to put things where it can deal with them, which is why sometimes when you've had a huge life shock, like grief,
Like
if
Trudy has had lost a
yeah,
loved
like if you
one.
cannot
Yeah.
deal with it in that moment, like if your body, because the body knows things before the conscious mind does, if the body knows that it cannot be processed at that point safely, it will put it somewhere until you
Yeah.
are safe. And so what can happen is sometimes years down the track, someone can find themselves just overwhelmed by grief, and they'll think that there's something wrong with them because the grief, the person might have died
Long time ago.
or that it's actually my reading of it, and this is my experiences. I don't have any science behind this. It's just my experience looking at these things and teaching for a while. Is
Hmm.
that it's happened because they feel safe on a subconscious level. They feel safe.
Yeah, yeah. So they're now ready to deal with it. They
The
weren't before.
body's gone. Oh, great. Okay, out we go. And it's the same with all sorts of aches and pains. Where I think, for example, a mother of a young child might have some aches and pains from various things, but the body's holding it together because that young child needs to be looked
Need
after.
them
That's
still.
the
Yeah.
priority. So it may not be until a few years down the track that the pain starts to emerge, and then there might not seem to be a cause. Like, how have I hurt my back?
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
The
Yes.
body's super, super smart. It's an extraordinary organism, and the more I've known about it, the more I just think this is amazing that this even exists like this, because it will constantly strive to keep you alive and healthy and whole, and it will make these compensations and until it reaches a point where it can't anymore. So if you've been stuffing things down, and I do say women, and we've possibly gone right off topic, but I do think women are great at stuffing anger down into their hips because
Yeah.
we have to. We're not allowed to express it culturally. There's so many different parts of the world where an angry woman is like such a terrible thing. And so we are good girls and we stuff it down and we stuff it down and we stuff it down. And then it lives in the
Yeah.
dark continent, which I've talked about before. The dark continent being the part of the body between the navel and the top of the thighs. This is my term for it. Because everyone goes, I have no idea what happens down there. They've got digestive problems, menstrual problems, lower back pain, hip pain, all sorts of things. And it becomes this mystery of why this is happening in that part of the body. It's like, because the body has really efficiently stuffed your anger down for years, and it's then reached a point where it can't hold it any longer, and it's starting to manifest various ways. Now, there would be a lot of people who are scientists and medical practitioners who would say this is fundamentally not true. But I always think of the fact that the French have words for emotional states that are related to the body. So you can avoir du spleen in French is to be splenetic, to have spleen. And we've lost that out of the English language, but other languages will still have these body part references for emotions.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah, coming through the years.
But your wisdom definitely comes across in the pages of your book.
Sorry to the listeners / viewers if you weren't interested in that.
No, that's great. So let's go back a little bit though. I want to hear, as someone who's more of a pantser, and when I try and plot, I start stressing out. You have talked before a bit about this spreadsheet that you have, right? So has a spreadsheet
table. It's a table, Microsoft Word, yeah.
Okay, can you tell us about the table? What type, like when do you start the table? What's on the table? Does it change throughout? Just tell us the process a bit. And the fact that you write in short sprints. So do you always know what you're going to write that day? Like, tell us about the whole process for writing this book.
So it's a landscape orientation Microsoft Word document, and I will leave space at the top to make notes as I go if I need to. And so I do the table, and I think if I have 4 main characters, then I'll usually do 7 columns. So
you try to always have 4 main characters?
No, that's just kind of, it's been the pattern. Well, Spellbird River had 5, and that's the last time I had 5.
And the one you're writing now might have 5?
It might do. I just think this particular character.
Keep going.
But, so I think I have 7. I'm just trying to think what I've done for the new novel. So I'll have 1 column that is the number of the chapter, and then I'll have another column that will be the time of year. And sometimes
do you have a certain amount of chapters that you think you'll always write?
No, but I have observed that my novels are usually around 60.
Okay, interesting. And word length for them would be about 2,000 words, maybe. Just
no, I don't think.
Don't even look.
No, I don't. So it just depends how long they are, and so then each character gets a column and a color, and that's so I can see the flow of colors from shifting points of view, so I can work out if I've bunched up.
If it's too much of one character or not enough of the other.
Yeah. So then I will plan 10, 15 chapters ahead, and I do that loosely because
I was going to say, what does the plan look like? So say for the first
couple of sentences each chapter.
Okay.
So I think ahead. So so I'm thinking of how the story may develop and what I want these characters to have happen to them and what they've told me they want to have happen to them. So we'll do the 10 to 15 chapters ahead very loosely because it will change almost as soon as I start writing. That plan will be obsolete. So it's a guide.
So why do it then?
Because it guides me into it. Okay. So it guides me into it's not that the whole plan will be obsolete, but there'll be some things that I need to start changing. So for example, the one I'm writing now, I thought I had the order of first chapters sorted, and then I finished writing the first chapter. I thought, oh no, I can't have that 1 second. And then so I moved it to third. So I changed the color-coded table, and started writing someone else's chapter second. And then I got to the end of that chapter and went, oh no, I can't have that third. It's going to have to be fourth. So now so I moved that around already.
Yeah.
And then the flow of the story is still intact, but that order change. So the order changing in terms of the first chapter for each character means that the rest of that story will now need to be
tweaked a little bit.
At least in terms of who speaks when.
You can. I should know this because I've just read your book literally, but I didn't take notes in terms of order of do you care, like is it Trudy? I don't think it is. There's not a pattern, is there, of who goes
no. Once we kick off the first chapter for each character, then it will be the flow of the story that determines
whatever needs to be there. So one other thing I want to note, I noticed about reading your book, and I think I noticed it before when reading your books. And it's interesting because we were talking about an agent briefly on TikTok earlier, CC Lyons, and I know that she's said something about backstory recently. Now, and there's a lot of backstory in the beginning of your books, but I love it, right? And I think as a new author, you're often told, don't info dump, don't put backstory and stuff in there. So how do you manage to make it not feel like that? Like, do you think about that specifically? Do you know how much we need to know about a character? I've had arguments between authors, and some are saying, get as much backstory as you can and then others like no backstory, drip feed it as you need it. So what's your kind of thoughts on backstory and how do you make it? Like, do you think a lot about that and how much you're going to reveal? Because we learn, so the first person is Trudy, right? Who's this lovely lady who owns the salon in town and she's owned it forever. She's a widow. She had this beautiful relationship with Laurie. You can feel how lovely, and even we hear her other hairdresser. Oh my gosh, what's her name?
Evie.
Evie. That's right.
Yeah.
I was like Eden. No, it's not Eden. We hear her like she's jealous of the relationship that Laurie and Trudy had because she
Mm.
doesn't have someone like that, right? Um, how much so we know a lot about Trudy in that first bit, right? We know that there's somebody else recently who's left the salon and opened a new one. Yeah, just I want to talk about backstory. And as a published author and a previous agent and an industry professional, I wonder if you can. Oh, funny here, right? I've written Sophie Wisdom here and underlined a sentence that said that she should. I don't even know what it says, that she should forget about them and concentrate on the people who stayed, not the ones who left. And I wrote Sophie Wisdom. Like I feel there's a lot of Sophie wise words throughout the book. But yeah, what's your theory on backstory?
I think it really depends on the novel and
Genre as well, do you think?
genre, perhaps. I think it just depends on the story you're telling. And so I live by the rule that every sentence has to advance the story, and also,
We need to know it at that specific point
yeah, you've
rather
got to tell the reader what they need to know when they need to know it. So for me, the backstory coming in the first chapter is actually to not get it out of the way, but I'm basically saying you're not going to need to know this for the rest of the novel, so I'm telling you now. So this is who
yeah,
the person
that's really
is,
interesting. Yep, yep.
and I know that these bits of information about this character are not going to come up later, or if they do, I need you to know this about the
But
person
we need to know a certain amount about a character, do you reckon, to connect with them? Is it a bit
in
like
my
that?
sorts of stories. In my sorts of
Yeah,
stories, so I could either, because I love writing dialogue. Now I could kick it off with a conversation,
big chat between people.
but then I need to bring in another character, and I need to at least another character, and I
And
need.
sometimes the dialogue if you're trying to get stuff across, it can feel info dumpy and like not like a conversation you and I would really have in life,
Yeah,
right?
because the way I write dialogue is realistic. I don't
Yeah,
info dump in dialogue. So then it would need to be a relationship that's actually going to be important in the story, because otherwise I've
that's
wasted the
true
reader's
as
time.
well. Yeah, why? Otherwise, we're thinking that that character that's there, there's a reason they're there, and then we're wondering why we're not seeing them again, or
Yeah.
yeah.
So in terms of the flow of the information, you'll see that there's usually a bit of dialogue, not necessarily a lot. And it also depends on who the character is. So some of my characters who are quite internalized, as in like they're very much in their own heads at the start of the story, though their opening chapters won't have a lot of dialogue because they're
No, well,
all in
chapter
their heads.
2 is Anna, and I also wrote here, get straight into character, right? So the first line is Anna glanced around her bedroom, her marital bedroom, so it's their bedroom, their house, the house that she works so hard to keep for lovely Gary and their children, for herself too, obviously, because she wants to have a nice home. But we do immediately get into her head, and I feel like I understand her character, but there is no dialogue.
Hmm.
um, I don't think there's any dialogue in that. Oh no, maybe one. Oh no, she's talking to herself. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then it does come because Gary turns up. So we immediately get into the drama happens straight away. She kicks him out. But I feel very much like I know her. But we've got their whole story almost like about
Yeah, and because
that
she was
point.
working herself up to something, and so that
Yeah.
was I knew she was going to kick him out in that chapter, so I had to tell the reader enough to give them a
Why?
context for why she was going to do that, and then I had to show her, because if I just said, "Oh, she kicks him out," well, that has no impact. But if
And
I
also, we
showed
also want I'm thinking about in our sort of novels that we write, which are feel good fiction, I would say. Like we want people to relate to the characters, right? And to
Yeah.
understand and to like, yeah, really to like most of the main characters. We want people to like them and relate to them, right? So if
Yeah,
she
because
just picked him out and we didn't know necessarily why, and we see she's got two young children, like we've got to understand. As I said, I thought that was done really well because, as someone who's been married for 20 years, I can sometimes think, oh yeah, that's realistic,
yeah, and I do often write about the impact of domestic labor on women and of the mental load because it keeps happening.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there are
yeah.
so many
I mean,
women
this
who
is
are
set in the
exhausted.
80s, and we should talk about that too, right? This is set in the 80s, so it's like 40 years ago now, but still, all the themes that are in it, all the things the characters go through, nothing like, well, I like to say some things have changed in terms of progressing, how
But not
women,
much has.
but not much has.
Yeah.
And the same, like even though it's set in the 80s, and I think it's great because this nostalgia set in the 80s, right? Even though I was born in 1980, so I can vaguely remember the 80s, but probably the 90s would be more my nostalgia. But I think even though it's 40 years ago, everything that these characters are going through here, except maybe the chain smoking, because I think most of us don't necessarily chain smoke now, it's so relatable, right? And so it could be, I was going to say it could be anywhere, but it also couldn't be anywhere because it's very much set of the era,
Hmm.
if that makes sense. So what,
Yeah.
I know we've talked before on this pod, and probably not, maybe on the pod, maybe together. All of your books are set in near history, would you
Hmm.
say?
Yeah.
Um, and I think there may be a few reasons why you do that. Do you want to explain why this one had to be the 80s for you? Because you've done, what years have you done?
Well, Fairvale started in 78. That's the earliest I've
Yeah.
done. And then I haven't gone past 2000. So
Yeah. So,
they're all either 80s or 90s. Yeah.
so why was this one chosen to be 80s
Because
rather
of
than
the Casey Dressler videos, literally, because
oh,
the Hot Look Salon was set in the 1980s, and I was
oh,
thinking about
really?
the
Okay. I
80s, and
thought
I
it
was
was
just
probably
like,
a modern person.
no, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, the 80s, and of course the hair in the
I
so
love the description of the salon too. Was it like pink and neon or
and orange, yeah, pink and orange, like
yeah.
because it was the 80s, and also the 80s we had a lot of hair. Diana, Princess of Wales, had
I
she gets
loved all
mentioned in
that
every
stuff.
novel,
Like
but
I
hair,
loved the fact it was so relatable because you can imagine like that everyone's asking for the Diana haircut. And I do kind of remember, you know,
and they were.
that era. And then in the 90s everyone wanted the Rachel haircut from Friends.
Yeah, the Diana haircut everyone I think thought was easy, but of course she had really, really thick
No,
hair. And
I think short hair is scary because I love it on when it looks good on people, but I'm not sure I could like pull off a short haircut because of my style. So yeah, I totally felt for the hairdressers in here too who are going, "Oh, honey,
it's not going
we
to suit you. Yeah.
it's not going to suit you, but they've got to do their job." I think this is also it does feel really like the hairdressers here, right? I never really thought about how hard it is for hairdressers sometimes.
Well, and also the fact that it's creative work in that if someone comes in wanting a haircut and wants something different, the hairdresser's not going to be like, oh great, I'm just going to cut it short. They're actually going to look at the shape of the person's face.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
why a great haircut can completely transform the way someone looks.
Mm.
Because if the hairdresser's cutting it in a certain way, angling it right, and layering it correctly, then it actually brings out their face. And a
Yeah.
bad haircut can make them look terrible. And
That leads in very well to a question I had about adornment because you mentioned that in our last podcast, and I just thought this is very much, and you said that you're interested in adornment and
yeah,
things like that, right? And this book is very much about, the women in the salon, they work hard to make people feel good about themselves. And we see through Josie, the young apprentice,
mhm,
but how she sort of comes out of herself when she is working the salon helping other people, but also she's got her own sense of style and different sort of stuff. And then we see that Ingrid, the woman who is, so we don't, as we said, we don't get her main point of view, but Anna, her daughter, is there. But Ingrid goes to the hairdressers, and that's obviously been her thing when she's been looking after her husband and in
yeah,
quite a dire sort of situation. And then Anna has a bit of she realizes how much actually take that. I guess the message sort of for me here is so often that we think that you're looking good for other people, right?
mhm,
But looking good makes you feel good too. So that's one of the themes I think in this book, right? And do you want to speak a bit about adornment and why you think it's important and whether that was in your head when you were writing this book?
It was absolutely partly to just show that hairdressing, and there would be several people, including a lot of women, who think that going to a hairdresser is frivolous. And Anna
I've
has
heard
that
people
voice.
say that recently. I've
Yeah.
heard a friend, a son's, like one of my son's friends' mums said, it's the only thing I do for myself. But it does feel like, she was, the way she was saying it, it was like she was justifying it. Like, oh, that's the only thing I do, really.
And you can even hear it when there are reports in the newspaper about the sorts of jobs that the federal government would like migrants to have when they're coming here, and hairdressing is often high on the list because we need more of them. And then the implication is from the reporting of like, oh, how frivolous is that to want
But
hairdressers?
we
But
need that, yeah.
hairdressing has gone on as long as humans have, as has adornment. Those things are tied together, and it's adornment is an act. It is an act of decoration, yes, for the gaze of others, but it's also an act of self-respect.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
because you're basically saying, I think I am worthy of being the canvas here. Like I think that
I
what
love
I
that.
have
Yeah.
presenting to the world is worthy of adorning. And by doing that, I am signifying to you that I have self-respect and dignity.
Yeah.
And for women, it is armor. And so the 1980s was actually, and I didn't mention Margaret Thatcher in the book, but Margaret
You
Thatcher
did.
had
I
a,
when I saw, oh
oh,
no, it was
maybe I
Maggie Tabra. No,
had
it
a
was
helmet.
Maggie Tabra.
Maggie
I was,
Tabra. I
yeah.
didn't think so. I did. Margaret Thatcher had this helmet of hair, and she needed it. If she had had a different sort of hairstyle,
Yeah.
then
So
she would have been
interesting.
signifying something very different. So, and Diana's hair. So I mentioned specifically in the book that after Prince Harry was born, Diana was growing her hair long,
Yeah.
and she wanted it long. So she actually wore it out to a couple of engagements, and then apparently Her Late Majesty the Queen told Diana to cut it out, that royal
Really?
ladies did not have long hair. So
Oh.
the long hair of
What does
Catherine.
she think of Kate and Megan
That's,
then?
I've just say the long hair of Catherine, the current Princess of Wales, is actually an act of revolution, and I'm
Oh.
going to briefly digress here and say that Catherine, who has a degree in art history
Yeah.
and completely understands signs and symbols and signifiers. When she emerged from hospital, having just given birth to Prince George, she specifically wore a dress that showed that her belly was still.
Yeah. I remember that.
And
Yeah.
there were so many people online who were like, "Oh my God, like she's so fat, that's
Yeah.
disgusting."
Yeah.
There's a lot
Yeah.
of that going, but she knew exactly what she was doing, and what she was doing
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
showing what it looks like when you've just
Have a
given.
baby. Yeah. No, she's amazing.
So, and Catherine wearing her hair long as she did, and still does, is again, in royal terms, an act of revolution. So she's been
I
doing
love,
that.
that makes me like her even more.
Yeah, oh no, she is very canny, and the coronation outfit, because the other than Camilla, no royal ladies were allowed to wear tiaras, so she
Yeah.
went and got a flower crown
Mm.
essentially. Um, so
I
again,
love
trying to
it.
signify. So, but back to the hair thing, it's adornment and there's a line from Elizabeth Taylor that I love, which is put on some lipstick, pour yourself a drink, and pull yourself together.
I love that too.
Putting on the lipstick is the first part of
Yeah.
that, and
Yep.
it's
Yep.
that act of by doing something to adorn myself. I'm taking the first step in pulling myself together. Essentially, it's like
Yeah.
an act of, oh well, if I can do something that's actually a mark of I'm ready to face the world, and also I want to decorate myself,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
I think that is a powerful statement. And we know it just in the way that people respond to what women in particular wear, and how they do their makeup, and how they do their hair, and all those sorts of things, that it means something. It wouldn't trigger people the way it does if it didn't mean
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Speaking of that, like, did you do, obviously, as you said, you've been in a hairdresser many times in your life. Um, but was there, and a lot of this stuff in here is kind of universal emotions, of grief, first love, worrying about whether, your family is going to connect with you, or, all this different, but was there any particular research you had to do for this book, like specific research?
Not really, because Terrigal in the 80s was a place I knew well, because my
Yeah. So
grandparents lived in.
Terrible's a real place. I
Terrigal
wasn't
is a real
sure.
place.
I thought it was, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Central coast of New South Wales, my grandparents moved to in the 80s, and
Yeah. The
they lived
setting you already knew like really well.
intrinsically. So I could just picture it. But the funny thing is, so looking at the layout of Terrigal, based on my memories of the 80s, I was like, I just do not remember a hairdressing salon on the main street, which is right where the beach is. But there's a street parallel to that, one back called Church Street. And so I thought, I'm pretty sure there's a salon there now. And I thought, okay, so if I was someone from the local area and I was a young woman setting up a hairdressing business as Trudy had been, I would put it in Church Street because the beachfront is not
Yeah,
necessarily
yeah, yeah.
the right place. People can see in, all those sorts of things, whereas Church Street a bit more private. Now, at your readers retreat in Scarborough this year,
Mhm.
I was talking to someone who came to the previous retreat. She's from Sydney. And then there was someone else who came up to me who said, I grew up in Terrigal and my mother had a hairdressing salon on Church Street in the 80s.
Oh my
And
gosh.
she also, as it turns out, went to school
Has
with
her mum read the
others.
book yet? I wonder.
But the person I was already talking to, her parents owned the building that the hairdressing salon was in. So this
Wow.
person who they didn't know each other, but the person who came up and
Wow.
said her mother had the hairdressing salon, her mother was a tenant of this other woman's.
Oh, that's amazing. I love stories
And I'm
like
not
that.
saying names, obviously, but
Yeah, yeah. But that's
but
so
that,
cool.
and I just thought, well, I often think with these stories that I'm drawing them from somewhere, and I don't know where.
Yeah.
I had
Well,
no
I swear,
idea.
maybe, I mean, as I said, you're very wise. I don't know, it couldn't have been a past life then because you're awake, you're alive then. But I swear there's something going on with you, Sophie. Um,
Well,
so
if I can help anyone feel less alone in this world, if these novels do anything, then in
then
that realm, then I think I've
that's
done my
your
job.
reasoning. I had two more questions, but I can only see the one here that I wanted to, I thought of another one, but one of them is the time period in this novel is about 5 months. Do you know that time period when you start, and how does that work? Like
So
I'm asking for myself because literally I never know how long the book's going to be, and the one I'm writing now I really possibly would help if I knew. So how did you know?
I knew everything happened needed to happen in a fairly short time frame. So Fairvale took place over
Why?
3 years. Just because of Josie actually was the
Okay.
reason. So Josie.
Josie's the youngest character. She's
But
the
she's the
apprentice.
apprentice, and I just thought I can't see her story going into when she's past that apprenticeship.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so
gotcha.
just thought, and Josie, I loved as a character. Actually,
I mean,
she
it's a perfect time for it because everything that happens, like it's a realistic time for what happens. If it was shorter, maybe it wouldn't feel so realistic, but if it was longer, yeah,
it was longer. She stops being an apprentice, and that's a different story. So
yeah,
what she was bringing to the story was a young woman who had never been quite sure of herself, and she's 19, and she's an apprentice, and it's her first ever
remembered
job.
my last question.
All
Okay.
those sorts of things. And so if I'd taken her story, say if I'd made the timeline 2 to 3 years, then she loses that part of her that's
Yeah.
still
Young,
wide-eyed and learning
fresh.
things, and then I'd have to shift that story. So Josie was the reason that I started to think, okay, this is going to be quite short. And I didn't actually know when I started,
Okay.
but
I was just wondering
I
because I
wasn't
was
sure.
thinking about your like spreadsheet and stuff. Like we,
No, I had it. I don't actually put the dates in the. I often will put a season, but I
yep.
don't necessarily say it's going to be this date, this date, this date. Sunshine Gardening, Weekends with Sunshine Garden Society. I knew that was 1 year because I wanted to pace it
The
by the
seasons.
months.
Yeah, yep, yep.
Yeah, season, and also just okay, months of the year, and then I could actually look up some plants that were from that
Yeah,
time and all that kind
that
of stuff.
makes
So I knew that was going to be a year, but most of them I don't know until I start, and then something in a
that
story.
makes me feel better. That's good.
Because yeah, we don't need to have it all sorted out. Sometimes the
Yeah,
characters
no,
are sorted out for us.
definitely. I 100% agree with that. So I have one more question, and then if there's anything else you want to, or then I've got two questions actually, because I'm asking another one now. So my this is not a question, it's kind of a statement, but also I'm one of those annoying people at the library who's giving a statement rather than a question. But it might also lead into a bit of a question. One thing I noticed is that there's all the men in your books are pretty good in this book, sorry,
Yeah.
right? And I definitely have good men in my novels because I think we need to see, like, we see so much, especially in crime and in the news and stuff, and a whole load of how bad the bad men that are out there, all the horrible things they're doing, and I'm not saying they're perfect, right? Gary has you know put himself into work, and unfortunately that's upset his wife. Um, Laurie's dead, so that's like a
Yeah.
annoying thing to have done. And then obviously Dylan, their son, he's not being the best son to his mum who's, grieving and all that. But we've got, so Evie has a little boy, Billy, but then her ex, or sort of ex, Steve-O, they have a great relationship in terms of, I loved, they're asking each other dating questions. They're kind of really good friends, even though they never made it go as a couple.
Mm.
And then we have Josie's boyfriend, Brett, who is just lovely as well. Right. And as I said, I purposefully want to write good men to show, but I wonder if that's something that you think about too, or it just kind of happened.
Very much think about it because I think we do see a lot of bad male characters in crime shows and novels, and often in women's fiction, there's some ratbag bloke, bad dates, all
Yeah.
those sorts of things. It's not stopping women getting involved with those men in real life. And I'm being very serious when I say this, but
So
women,
interesting.
when we get involved with men, we have to actually assess it in light of, will this person harm me? Because we
Yeah.
have to presume that they are all strangers until we know them
Mm.
really, really well. But we have to start putting our well-being and our lives first. And I do say it seriously because women are being killed by men that they are intimately involved with,
Yeah.
and it's not
Daily
getting better.
basis.
So
Mm.
if putting all the bad characters in the stories meant that women were warned off them, that would have happened already. So part
Oh,
of my role as a storyteller is to think what is actually needed at this point in history, not the point in history I'm writing about, but at this point in history for readers. Partly what is needed is to show how decent men behave, so
yes.
you can recognize it when you see it. And I made a conscious
So the
choice.
women can see that on the page and then they're not settle for less.
Well, that's right, because we have been trained to settle for less because it benefits mediocre men when
Yeah.
we do. And I'm being really upfront about this, but I see
Yeah.
it over
Yeah.
and over again where we have been brainwashed by movies that are produced by mediocre men in Hollywood, who basically put forward stories of mediocre men who win over the
Yeah.
most amazing woman, and we look at that and go, oh, okay, well, that's the sort of bloke
That's,
who's
yeah, that's
there.
so true.
And we actually don't necessarily prize decency in men, and competence is really sexy. I'm very fond of saying.
Yeah.
We often look at men who are like might be great around the house and everything, and because there's not necessarily the flash job or whatever, we think, oh well. And I'm not saying this is true of all women, obviously,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think culturally we don't value competence and decency because they're not exciting or they're not seen to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. That goes back to the whole bad boy thing, probably, doesn't it? How
Yeah, and there is a bit of that
no one
too.
wants a bad boy. No one wants a nice guy, really,
And
but
when
they
you're
do
a
when
teenager,
you're actually like living, like when you're in the drudgery of day-to-day life.
when you're raising children, like
Want
you
the
want
nice guy, the
someone
good guy.
is
Yeah.
decent and competent because otherwise it's all on you. And so this is
Decent is a really good word to
I'm
describe it. Yeah.
being really serious when I say this is women need to put their own priorities first, because
Hmm.
when women put themselves first, the whole world benefits.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
We will amplify whatever is going on for us and offer it to other people.
Yeah.
So it is
Well, it
maybe,
goes back to that old happy wife, happy life.
well, it's very true, and decent, competent men understand that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I consciously thought in this novel I need to present men who are decent and competent, and they're not necessarily the romantic hero of a lot of stories, and they also may not be the best at communicating what they're doing
Mm.
because they're often trying to show it, not tell it.
Yeah.
And I hope I show with some of these stories that actually when the women stop holding on to certain ideas of how the men should be,
Yeah.
then they realize what is there for them, and and the men in our lives, if you're heterosexual and you're in a relationship with a man, they should make our lives easier, not harder.
Yeah.
And if they're making our lives
Well,
harder,
that's what Anna's saying, isn't it? Like, literally, what is the point in having Gary around in the beginning? Like, and so,
Gary just had a different idea about how he was showing Anna that he loved
yeah.
her.
Which I think is definitely a thing between men and women, right? Like, sometimes we value different things, and that can be a cause of conflict.
It can
When
be.
both people are actually wanting the best and doing their best, but they're not
Yeah.
giving necessarily what the other person wants because that's not what they necessarily want.
Yeah, and it's often not about saying we have to talk to each other, because sometimes talking isn't people's core competency and they don't want to talk about it, but they're trying to, it's honoring the fact that they'll show you often, and men will do things for people, whereas women will be something for someone.
Yeah.
And again, that's just about knowing to recognize the differences as opposed to holding each other to standards that we can never meet because it's just never going to be in our natures to do it. So
Yeah.
yeah, so Steve-O, I think in the story, this is Evie's ex, and he could definitely have been the stereotypical baby daddy.
Nasty guy or whatever. Yeah.
I just thought, no, I just knew he wasn't like that. I just
Yeah.
knew that
No, I
they
think that was
not made the
really
relationship work, and that was okay.
lovely relationship and showed, yeah, that it's realistic, isn't it? You know, not everyone is going to be able to make a relationship work, but you don't have to be toxic about it.
Yeah, and I'm also going to say, like, you and I, as regular listeners to this podcast, know you and I don't necessarily come from backgrounds where we've had men behaving well. We're both a product
No.
of his. My biological father managed to keep me a secret from his family, his wife and children for, well, the entirety of his life. He's now dead. So it's
Yeah,
not as if I've got some rich history of men in
no,
my lineage
either.
behaving well. So,
Ah, that's so funny. Yes, well, not funny, but you know what I mean. So we probably need to wrap up soon, but I would love to thank you for sharing so honestly about your thoughts in this book. And as I said, there's so much Sophie wisdom in this, so it's like getting a bit of Sophie therapy if you need, like. Um, but I think it's also interesting. I don't know how you feel it. When I've like, this is probably the book I've read when I've known you the most.
right, yeah.
And it's so like I did, you know, for the last one, a bit better. But like, you know, I think I find it very interesting to read a book of someone who I know now quite well because I just see them in there. Do you ever
Right.
find that with your like? Whereas someone else who's not my, you know, there's lots of different characters, and I'm not saying you're like there's something of, but I feel like there's something of you. I can recognize things or I can hear your voice in certain things, whereas I probably didn't have that before. And I've had that with other people I've met. I've read their books earlier, and you know, it's been a different experience to when I've met them and then read the next book. It adds something interesting, I think. I don't know. Have you had that experience with reading people's books?
I certainly read your books differently now because I
Yeah,
know you.
yeah,
And I don't know that I necessarily think you're in there, but I really enjoy reading them knowing you've written them.
yeah,
You know what
yeah.
I
Maybe
mean?
I
It's
feel
like you're
that
telling a
too.
story
Like,
to
yeah,
me. Yeah.
yeah. I know, that's interesting. Well, there was definitely some wise things that I think possibly Trudy said a few times that I thought, yeah, so that's Trudy's wise, like Sophie. Um, but anyway, what are you writing next?
I am writing something. The working title is The Frock Shop, and
Well,
it's
that's
actually set in the suburb where I live, and it's very different to
wow.
anything I've written before.
Why? How?
Structurally, it's going to be quite different. I'm going to keep that part a secret.
Okay.
But structurally,
It's
it's
a
going
verse novel, isn't it?
to wish I don't have the discipline to write a verse novel. Yeah, so it's interesting. It has certainly, even though I planned those points of view first chapters, none of them has turned out the way I thought. I just
That's the best,
really none of
though.
them. So I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm just going to let it run and
Well,
see.
I personally think that's always a good sign.
Well, that's good.
Well, thank you, Sophie. Is there anything else you want people to know about this book or the writing experience of this book or anything else?
Only that if they have any questions about it, I'm always open to questions. You can contact us on various socials or things like that. But I just really so much appreciate anyone who spends time with my books. It's a big commitment of time in a busy world, and I just think if you want to spend time with those characters, that's amazing. And that I've let them go. Once they're out in the world, I don't own them anymore. I certainly belong to them and they belong to me, but I don't own them anymore. I
Yeah.
can't govern anything that happens now, and each person who reads the book has their own relationship with them. So thank you to those of you who are forming relationships with the characters, and I hope you enjoyed the book.
I have one more question from what you just said, sorry, because you've never written a sequel as far as I know, have
No.
you? And I'm sure that you've had requests
For
from readers
Fairvale, mainly for
too.
Fairvale.
Yeah. Would you ever consider going back to Fairvale then?
I did. I wrote a whole proposal for a second Fairvale and
Oh,
was
really?
rejected by my publisher.
Oh, well, we're here to whatever to sign a petition. We can start a petition.
Yeah, so they're just like, no one's going to read that. So there you go.
All right. Well,
No
thank
second
you,
Fairvale.
Sophie, for being so generous with your time. Hopefully we made sense since we've done this is like our third hour now
Lulu.
recording for the day. And don't forget, everyone, if you want to ask us any questions, that is the whole essence of why we started Dear Rach and Soph. Between us, we have a few years' experience in the writing business and the publishing industry. So if you have any questions about writing, publishing, or you want some Sophie therapy, well, it's actually Dear Rach and Soph therapy, but if you want some therapy, send us a message and we will do our best to answer your questions.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks for reading the book and thanks for your questions.
Thank you for writing it. Bye, everyone.
Bye.